The town of Black Hollow was a place that most people avoided. Nestled deep in the woods, surrounded by endless fog, it was as if nature itself had tried to erase it from the world. The few who remained spoke in hushed tones, their faces pale, their eyes always darting toward the mist that never lifted. Lena Carter had never heard of Black Hollow until she received the letter. It arrived in an envelope so old and brittle it nearly crumbled in her hands. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged with what she prayed was only water. "Lena, I don't have much time. You must come home. I know they told you to forget, but you can't. You belong here. If you don't return, I will not last the winter. And then, neither will you." Uncle Raymond. Lena hadn't seen her uncle in over 20 years. Her mother had taken her away from Black Hollow when she was just a child, refusing to speak of it again. Now, with her mother long gone and no family left but Raymond, she felt an obligation, an unease she couldn't explain but also couldn't ignore. The road to Black Hollow was worse than she expected. Thick trees pressed in from both sides, their gnarled branches clawing at her car like skeletal fingers. The fog swirled unnaturally, thickening the farther she drove, as if warning her to turn back. By the time she reached the town, the sun had dipped behind the trees, leaving only shadows and a creeping chill in the air. The streets were empty. No children played outside, no lights shone from the houses. It was a town trapped in time, forgotten by the world. Raymond's house stood at the very edge of town, a decrepit Victorian structure that seemed to sag under the weight of years. The paint had peeled away in great flakes, the windows stared back at her like empty sockets. She knocked once. No answer. She pushed the door open. The air inside was thick with dust and something else, something foul. The house was silent, save for the slow, rhythmic creaking from somewhere upstairs. Lena hesitated before calling out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Uncle Raymond?" The creaking stopped. A moment later, a door upstairs groaned open. Lena's heart pounded as she climbed the staircase. The wallpaper was peeling, and the wooden steps groaned beneath her weight. At the top of the stairs, a long hallway stretched before her, lined with closed doors. Only one stood open, the room at the very end. Inside, the bed was empty, but the sheets were rumpled, as if someone had just been there. A faint scent of mildew and decay clung to the air. On the floor beside the bed lay a single piece of paper. She picked it up. "Don't look at them. Don't listen. If you hear whispering, close your eyes. Do not follow them into the fog." A chill ran through her spine. Before she could react, something shifted behind her. A whisper. A low, rasping breath. She spun around. Nothing. Only the empty room, the shadows stretching too far, moving just a second too late. Lena spent the night in Raymond's house, unable to shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. She found no sign of her uncle, only strange little reminders that he had been there, a half-eaten meal, a coat draped over a chair, the lingering scent of his old cologne. The fog outside pressed against the windows, thick and impenetrable. Somewhere in the distance, a faint voice called out. Lena stiffened. It was a child's voice. Soft, pleading. "Help me." The warning note flashed in her mind. "Don't listen." She clenched her eyes shut, forcing herself to breathe, to ignore it. But the voice grew louder. "Please. I don't know where I am." Her hands trembled. She knew it wasn't real. It couldn't be. A creak sounded from the hallway. She turned, pulse hammering. A shadow moved just beyond the doorway. Tall. Thin. Too still. She reached for the bedside lamp and flicked it on. The light flickered, once, twice, then the bulb shattered. The room plunged into darkness. Breathing. Right beside her ear. Lena bolted from the room, stumbling down the hallway, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The walls seemed to stretch, the floor bending beneath her feet. As she reached the stairs, something cold brushed against her arm. She didn't stop. She ran. By morning, the town looked unchanged, but Lena knew better. Something was wrong here. The people she saw moved stiffly, their faces devoid of life. No one made eye contact. No one spoke above a whisper. She stopped a woman near the grocer's. "I'm looking for my uncle, Raymond Carter." The woman flinched, her eyes darting toward the thick fog curling at the edge of the street. "You need to leave," she murmured. "Before it takes you, too." Lena's stomach twisted. "Before what takes me?" The woman's lips trembled. "The ones in the fog." Lena turned, her gaze drawn toward the swirling mist. She thought she saw something shift within it, something tall and thin, its limbs moving unnaturally. The woman grabbed her wrist. "They whisper," she hissed. "They pretend to be lost children. They call to you. And when you follow," her voice broke, "you never come back." A gust of wind rushed through the street, and the fog thickened. From within, a voice called out. Soft. Desperate. "Lena, help me." Her blood ran cold. She knew that voice. It was her uncle's. Lena should have left. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back. But if there was a chance, just the slightest chance, that Raymond was alive, she couldn't abandon him. She stepped forward, the fog swallowing her whole. The world inside was different. The air was thick, damp, pressing against her skin like unseen hands. The trees loomed taller, their bark slick and black. Shapes moved in the distance, too fast, too silent. And the whispers. "Lena, over here." She turned sharply. A figure stood ahead, a man, hunched, his back to her. His clothes were tattered, his skin gray. "Uncle Raymond?" The figure twitched. Turned. Lena's breath caught in her throat. His face was stretched, his mouth too wide, his eyes, black, endless voids. He grinned. And the whispering turned to laughter. The fog closed in. And Lena screamed.